Yeah, I'm joined by my CMO today. Number one. Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Phoebe Darling Adeline Great Krasno, and I'm Jess's daughter.
Very good. And Phoebe just came back from actually sewing workshop.
Leg warmers.
Wow. And the shirt. You want to show that off a bit? Very nice. So thanks everyone for coming. Everyone having a good time? Yeah. Awesome. Is this everyone's first time at Wanderlust? Have they been here before? First time. How are we doing? Pretty good? Fourth, right. Right. This is the fourth year, and actually I measure them by the amount of children that I have. Because the first year, you were here, and Lolly was here. I'm going to sit. But who was not here? Micah wasn't here. That's right. And my wife entered Yoga Twister pregnant, and she won. And she won a free ticket to Wanderlust. Amazing. Not that she didn't need it. But so who has kids here? All right. I think one of the most annoying things someone told me years ago before I had children was there are two groups of people in the world, those with kids and those without. And I thought that was so annoying until I had kids. And of course now I say it all the time and other people think I'm annoying. But I will give you all one piece of advice, is that if you are foolish enough to throw a festival of this scale, do it without kids. And there's a number of reasons why, but the biggest is that once your kids see this, their expectation level for their birthday parties are ridiculous. And in fact, after the first year, we actually had to launch Phoebe Fest for her birthday, P-H-E-S-T. And then just a number of weeks ago in Vermont, at Wanderlust, Vermont, it happened to be my middle daughter, Lolly's 5th birthday. So, of course, the great challenge is to satisfy your children as a father. So we actually have a little bit of video that I think Hefe sent along of Wanderlust, Vermont, and what it takes to make your children happy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we did this last night for some strangers, but tonight I'd like you to do it. Step right up over here, Lolly. This is your spot right here. Right there. Say hi, Lolly. Lolly's 5. So ladies and gentlemen, you know how the song goes. On my cue, maybe we can sing a little song to her. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Molly. Happy birthday to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have cupcakes coming in and around. Here come the cupcakes, ladies and gentlemen. There are 500 cupcakes at home. This is how we all.
Okay, you've indulged me enough. Thank you very much. But that was 500 cupcakes that came out. So if it's anyone's birthday tonight, don't get any ideas, because I'm never doing that again. But yeah, I have expertise on really very few subjects, one being quite broad and one being very, very narrow, the former being fatherhood and the latter being producing yoga festivals. It's very niche. No one else does it. In fact, there's 3 other people in the world, so when I see them, we talk for hours. But much to my daughter's delight, I am in the Guinness Book of World Records for a category right next to the woman with the longest fingernails. There, I am. There's a picture of me, a much more banal category, but I have uttered 2 words in consecutive order more than any other human being alive. And those are the words yoga and community, in tandem yoga community. And I'm going to say it as many times as I possibly can over the next 10 minutes to enhance my total, because there are a number of people here that are gaining on me. That term is something that's used quite freely. You know, raise your hand if you feel a part of the yoga community. Okay, good. So quite a few of you. But so if I said, you know, hey, you know, come down and you know, see MC Yogi, he's performing tonight. You know, the whole yoga community will be there. You don't really bat an eye when you hear that, because you sort of have a nebulous association with what that means. And so do I use it all the time. But I'm often talking to people like that are not in the yoga community. And I remember an interview I did with a big media outlet maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And I said, you know, yoga community, you know, 55 times in the first 5 minutes. And finally, this journalist, you know, said, stop, you know, Jeff, you know, what the heck, I think she said, is the yoga community? And, you know, sometimes that's what it takes, is someone completely objective from the outside to sort of shine a flashlight on your bottom and, you know, really make you kind of examine what you mean when you say something. So I have spent like the last 3 or 4 months thinking about that a lot. What is the yoga community? Because my sense is that it's a lot more than what people just do on their mat. And how do we define it? You know, what are our values? And so I've been talking to people and researching and doing different things, and you know, in the quest to kind of greater understand like who we are, you know, I first kind of decided like, okay, well, what is community? And you know, there's a lot of communities out there. You know, the Buddhist community and any other communities anyone can think of. A fly fishing community. The kids community. I don't know if anyone's a member of all 3 of those communities. That would be extraordinary. But I think what I kind of came to is that a community is a group of people who willfully gather around shared values and behavior. So that was something I can live with, and you're going to have to live with it too for now. So, you know, if that's the case, then, you know, well, what are our values? And to answer that question, I will pose a question to you, not about yoga, but about, with my help from my friend, but yogurt. And here we are. So, anyone lactose intolerant, you can be exempt. Okay, you're out. You're out. But the rest of you, who occasionally probably enjoy a bit of yogurt, are going to the store. And there's a very small store, so you have a very limited choice. And here are your choices. And I guess just from a show of hands, I would be curious to know who would then pick our candidate on, I guess that would be your left, the Stonyfield yogurt, of course strawberries, or we have the Dannon. So first, who would buy the Stonyfield? Okay, and any hands for Dannon? 1 hand for Dannon. Amazing. I've done this 15 times. You're the first person that picked Dannon. Congratulations. I feel bad for Dannon doing this because I've got nothing against Dannon. But I could find, this is the only, blame him because this is the only Google Images thing I could find with strawberries, so it's your fault. No huge surprise. That's sort of a setup question. But the reason why I ask is really, why did you make that decision? So if I could just maybe get a little bit of feedback of why people picked the stony field, why they made that decision. So anybody? Organic. Yeah. It has fat in it, okay. It's organic.
Health factors, unknown health factors, and it's potentially better.
Mm-hmm.
Has a picture of a farm on it. Packaging.
Farm. You must be in marketing. Do you work, who do you work for? Oh, sorry. Well, the amazing thing, so I've done this a number of times, and organic comes up quite a bit. You know, people that are from the Northeast have a good sense of who Stonyfield is, and they work with local farmers. They're very connected to the local communities. They give back a lot. You know, they are, you know, their foil cap is more environmental, all these kinds of things. Also, the picture of the cows has come up. I think you know, how we make our decisions gives us sort of a window into what our values are. And this is why, really, I asked this question. And what is also interesting is sometimes it's what we don't say that gives us even a more compelling window into the decisions and the choices that we make. Because I have done this many, many times, and again today, and nobody, not once, has ever said taste. So, I mean, it is a food, ostensibly, and, or essentially, it is a food, but the determining factor, the criteria upon which you make your decisions, and people in the yoga community have made their decisions about this particular dilemma, but this as sort of a representation for greater choices, has actually very little to do with what the product actually is. It's a food, and provided it doesn't taste like dog food, people don't care that much. You know, the other thing is that no one said price. So either you're a bunch of rich people with no palate, or palate is a sense of something tasting good. Or really, there's something more there, and I would veer towards the latter interpretation, is that as a community, these things, environmentalism or health or buying organically, are part of a larger process of decision making, which I connect to mindfulness, which is honestly, for me, in its simplest form, to be thinking through the consequences of your actions and of your decisions. So as a community, I feel that we are making these kinds of decisions all the time. In fact, this is what I've really settled on, is that the yoga community is defined by its commitment to mindful living, to our practice, to reducing our carbon footprint, to buying locally and organically, to cultivating a sense of personal spirituality in a incredibly complicated and time when we're connected all the time, and probably most importantly to consuming consciously and ethically. So, you know, I see the yoga community as being defined by those values. I also see us in a greater sense as part of a mindful generation that is passionately engaged in this process of trying to live a life that is good for ourselves and simultaneously for others and the earth. So that's where I've settled in terms of kind of who we are as a community. And we are growing, and there is great evidence to support that. There are 15 to 20 million people practicing yoga in the United States, spending some $6 billion a year on products. There are, over the last 10 years, we've bought 2 million hybrid cars. We've contributed to an organic food business, and it is now $30 billion per year, growing at a 17 to 20% rate, the fastest growing sector of the food marketplace. We, at a local level in 1994, there was approximately 1,400 farmers markets in the United States. There's almost 10,000 operating farmers markets today. There are 24,000 yoga studios in the United States. 90, I actually don't know this part of the data, but I would say that somewhere 95% of them are run and owned and financed at a totally local and grassroots level. So that to me is a sign that, okay, that we're growing. So we know kind of now what we believe in. We know that we're growing. So what do we actually look like, this 15 to 20 million people? Well, 75% of us are female, 25 to 44. We, I shouldn't use we, I guess, in that sense. There's something I didn't tell you. No, we are, almost all have a college education. Our average household income is somewhere between $75,000 and $80,000. So, 15 years ago or so, this group of people were often called, soccer moms. Maybe that would be a little bit older too. But I kind of have now begun to think of this demographic or this group of people as yoga moms. And I grew up like in a political family. So, if you're going to map on political speak on top of that, you're talking about the independent female voter. And that is the most sought after group of voters in the United States. And they also happen to be one of the group of people that have determined so many of our big elections over the last generation and a half. So when we begin to look kind of through this prism, we begin to realize that we may just be a lot more powerful than we think we are as a community. So, when I start to examine then what the role of this community is within society, well, I'm already kind of looking at what we already have accomplished. And to me, that is largely most evident in the consumer marketplace. Because as conscious consumers, we have basically completely changed the way small companies and big develop products and market, where the social good is a prominent factor in what determines the bottom line. And you can see that across, Toyota's commitment to, creating electric vehicles, to, I'm wearing Timberland shoes, and they're not paying me to say this, but, these are all made out of recycled material. To Walmart, an extremely controversial subject, but who bringing in 600 organic SKUs, since 2006, and the long tail of that. To at the very most local level, your like organic, tea shop, or your kind of small batch chocolatier, there has been in the consumer marketplace a huge reaction to who we are and what our buying power is. This notion that we vote 3 times a day. So, give yourself a hand. I mean, but don't give yourself too big of a hand, because there is, at the same time that like Coke and Pepsi are now like embattled in the race for the first 100% plant-based bottle, there are some very, very serious problems. 30% of us in America are obese. That's leading to record levels of chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease. We spend $4,300 per person in the United States on healthcare, more than any other country, but we rank number 37 in life expectancy. In this country, of the total world carbon emissions, we emit 25% of them. So, there is serious work to be done. And the reason that I am particularly kind of passionate about this community and and why I think about this so much is that I feel that our values are so inextricably tied to the most salient issues of our time. You know, a month ago, the Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act, and you know, it's like, can you tell me a community that can talk about health and wellness with greater authenticity and credibility than our community? You can't, because this is who we are. And so when we are developing healthcare policy in this country, we should have a seat at that table. Can you tell me a group of people that can speak with more credibility and authenticity on what we should and should not eat? You know, so when we're debating the Farm Bill as they are now, and we're talking about food policy in this country, should we not have a voice? Should we not have a seat at that table? You know, can you tell me a group that can speak with more credibility about the environment and reducing our carbon footprint? I mean, this is who we are. This is how we live our lives. These are our values. So when we're talking about developing environmental policy in this country, I feel that we need to have a seat at that table, that we need to express our voice. And, you know, I have stopped thinking about the yoga community needing to be involved in politics, but I think it is absolutely imperative that we are involved in policy. And those are different. So, you know, what do I see? Like, you know, big vision, you know, stuff is like, okay, well, what if we built a network where our community could communicate across 24,000 yoga studios, not unlike the evangelical community has been able to communicate across their 250,000 churches. You know, is that a possibility where we are communicating, where we are signing petitions, where we are getting measures on ballots, where we become someday a powerful, mindful voting bloc that people need to take seriously? And, you know, I think that is kind of my big dream. But I get discouraged all the time, and that the obstacles for change often seem so great. And, you know, when you look at like voting data, the reason why people don't vote often is because they feel powerless. They feel that the obstacles are too great. So when, you know, when I think about that, I think about two things. One was a trip that I, you know, took as a child to South Africa when I was, well, wasn't a child, I was 18. In 1988, and I was working in Soweto, and then I went to Cape Town, and I went to the Table Mountain, and I'm looking out at Robben Island, where, you know, Nelson Mandela was there for 27 years. And every day waking up in a prison cell, you know, as big as this little corner here. And I think that, you know, every day he woke up with hope in his heart, and he worked. And eventually, though it seemed like change would never come, it did. So if he can do it under those circumstances, you know, can we ask something of ourselves in a free society? The other thing I think about is honestly just kind of practical. And it's actually it's a number. And there was actually an incredible coincidence with this number. And that number is 537. And I don't know if that number means anything to anyone here, but 537 was the number of votes that separated George Bush and Al Gore in the 2000 election, 537. And I was actually, so that number has had resonance and power with me kind of as I've been thinking about this over the last few months. And so just 3 days ago, when when I was sort of, checking the ticket counts for Wanderlust like I do 500 times a day, and also checking kind of the sign-ups and who's going to what class and all that stuff. I was looking through Sean Corn's sign-ups, and I noticed that she had 537 sign-ups for her class today, or I think it was tomorrow morning, in the big yoga tent. And I was like, well, that's very coincidental. And I was like, started thinking, I was like, well, geez, if the contents of one yoga class had gone to Florida and voted all the same way, it would have been a tie. So then you think, like, when you begin to think about what we stand for, what our values are, and what our power is to change society, then you begin to realize that even at the smallest and grassroots level, what you do in your daily life can have resonance. And I leave you with this quote, which is, never doubt the power of a small group of committed citizens to change the world. It is the only thing that ever has. Thank you. So, if you have any questions, not about that, or about Wanderlust in general, and why we did this and why we put it together, my partner in arms is here also, Sean, and my daughter is here, and I'm happy to hang out and answer some questions. And thank you guys very much for listening. Appreciate it. Yes?
Can you talk a little about the beginning when you started thinking about having the Wanderlust Festival?
Yeah.
In mind?
Absolutely. Well, my partner Sean, who's in the lovely green hat, we were running we come from we were in a band together. That's really what it was. Many years ago, and we all went to university together, Sean and my wife Skylar, and myself. And, we grew up, very politically. But we also loved the arts. And so we ran and still do, run a music company devoted towards artist development, and we manage and represent a lot of artists. And we also run a record label. Sort of simultaneously, my wife was building her business, literally upstairs, not in this building, but upstairs from where we were. And that was a yoga studio, and we were both in downtown Manhattan, just a couple of blocks north of the World Trade Center, where it was. And so, Sean and I were building this business, and, we were very, the music business is very marketing focused, and, there's a lot of, design and creative development and all this kind of stuff. And so we had been doing that and developing some degree of expertise in that. And then, my wife was building this yoga studio upstairs. And, we got to go on a couple of these yoga retreats, and she was going to Costa Rica and all these things. And we were like, wow, this community is just so excellent. They basically embody or everything that we kind of grew up, believing in. So eventually we kind of came to the realization as we got a little bit older, as, could we create a large-scale event that combined sort of the marketing and production values of our expertise with the kind of social and moral and community values of the yoga world to create something new and special. So it was sort of like a chocolate in my peanut butter kind of scenario. And that was kind of the genesis of it, to be honest. And, since then, we've put in a tremendous amount of thought in terms of like, corporate mission and that. And, really honestly, like we are 100% committed to the promotion of mindful living. That's who we are. And in this particular iteration, we, gather community and create platform for that. And we hope to do, a lot more, whether that's, media or other things. But I hope that answers some of your question. Yeah.
I actually work in advocacy, so everything you've been talking about is really fascinating to me. Given that you've been thinking about this, I would expect that you've been thinking about what next steps might be. Can you share some of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, we're very busy with our core business, to be honest with you. But we also, right now, have largely decided to help support some of these things that we believe in through partnership and through creating access and platform by working through with partners. And so, very specifically, like Off the Mat into the World, and Sean's work, and Carrie and Hala and all the people involved in that have done so much important work with leadership training and that sort of thing over the years, but now are very focused on the Yoga Votes initiative and getting people registered, but more than that, really getting people to begin to see their role in society through the lens of yoga. So, that's kind of what we're doing now. In terms of like, if I could find 2 minutes to start a 501c3 or a 501c4, I believe that we have, we've built an infrastructure to facilitate or to begin to create some of these networks or infrastructure that I think we would need to begin to wire the community. So when you look at like what the evangelical community, how they wired their community and have done so with unbelievable success and expertise, that's a cool model for us. And it relates to kind of what we do directly with Wanderlust. We don't really take out any like billboard advertising or like, we do little radio spots and some print advertising and stuff, but generally really what we do is we market through yoga studios, and we've built a database of 3,000 yoga studios that are partners with Wanderlust. And there's a million different kinds of levels of partnership how we engage with those studios. But really, okay, look at it through the lens of like what we could do to kind of wire our community. We're already speaking to studio managers, lead studio managers, studio owners all the time. So the idea, and we already have that relationship, so the idea of developing a network through which all those people could communicate, I think is there for us. And then, so I think that's one way where we can play a role. In terms of some of the other things, I feel like there's a huge white space out there for leadership. Because while we have sort of powerful voices kind of within our community, we don't have a lot of voices that are at the national scale. And as a community, and we have largely been, in some ways to our great credit, very sort of parochial and grassroots and local and all that stuff. But in some ways, because we are that way, we have not, engaged like publicists and PR people and legal representation and like, so where I feel is like that we might be able to help play a role in sort of creating leaders that would fill sort of what I think of as a white space. Like, what is this generation, or who is this generation's Martha Stewart or Oprah? Well, they are up here, but they're kind of like that generation that's sort of like getting older, and like who's that like aspirational figure that can speak to the values that I talked about?
Or Congressman Tim Ryan.
Well, yes. Where is he? He's late. Yeah, or for a very important date, but we will see him later. Or Tim Ryan. And that's why I like him so much. And I follow him around. And he follows me around. Yeah, so those are some of the things I think we can do. We need to build infrastructure, and we need to build leadership. Yeah.
Since you had spoken about leadership, I work for a company who's very invested in building leaders for the world. And I recently read something in, I believe it was the Real Simple magazine, and it was just a small little question that people can write into, asking, what is a leader to you, or what is the most important characteristic about a leader? And I was just curious, since that's a word that we all kind of assume and think, oh, leader, yeah, I kind of know what that means. And since it's so important to you, I was just curious what your thoughts on that, on building a leader, on what is the most important thing for what you want to spread, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think leaders have to be aspirational, and inspirational. And I think that where we have, when I talk about a white space, I think, that there is, in our world, I think that there are, that there is someone that could be kind of, I suppose, kind of inspirational for people in their 20s and early 30s, and aspirational for people in their 40s and 50s. And I think that that person, that's probably what I think about when I'm thinking about this leader. I'm not really when I'm thinking about leadership, I'm not necessarily talking about, someone in Congress. I'm talking about maybe someone like on TV, or someone with a big platform. Because, we start looking at like, leaders like in the evangelical community that are syndicated on like 3,000 radio stations, like that. And have, just massive platforms. That's kind of more of what I'm thinking about. So I think, we need to find that aspirational figure. And then I think, more sort of behind the scenes, we need to support and buttress that leader with the kinds of services that they need, back office infrastructural services. Because it's like Barack Obama is inspirational, but, without a ton of money and a big infrastructure, he's like a state senator in Illinois. So, we need to, I think that those are the two things that we really need to, create that leader. Leaders also have to be incredibly like knowledgeable and honest. They need to be able to relate, to people. They need to be able to speak to a lot of people at one time, and also like feel your pain, They need to do that. So, yeah, I hope that answers some of it. Yeah.
So in talking about building infrastructure and wiring the community, have you thought about how to utilize social media to harness the community that you've built?
Yeah, well, I think that would probably, there are people so much more gifted and smarter than I when it comes to social media and how to harness the power of social media. But, I see what we do as an event with social media, and it is a massive focus for us. It's like we're talking about it every day. I refresh my Facebook page like as many times as I say yoga community, which is a lot. So, certainly, that I think is part of what we need to use. Now, I feel like Facebook could be the platform for this network, but maybe not. So you're shaking your head. So you probably know I should be asking you the question. Well, what do you think?
I think we need to build a niche community like Facebook, specifically for the spiritual mindful yoga community. That's built around our needs and our platform, and that embodies our values, but gives us a place to sort of work from.
Yeah.
That's specifically niche.
I think there's great validity to that. I think the challenges are that everybody spends all of their time on Facebook and Twitter. So it's like, how do you then, migrate enough people to really make a difference into like a new social media platform? But, I agree. If you were to network 24,000 yoga studios and get all of them talking to each other, and they say, hey, we have, this is something that's very important in Colorado, and I want all the Colorado yoga managers and yoga studios to know that we're galvanizing around this, and here's a petition, here's an event, here's a leader, here's something. Let's go out and join and make that happen, and that could be very powerful. Yeah.
No one really wants to admit it, but there is a class difference or a monetary difference between, especially as yoga's growing, between the people who are able to participate, whether it's taking yoga classes or coming to a festival like this, but I do believe that the people who really need it are the people who don't have health insurance or are struggling financially. What do you see, or what is your advice, or how do you feel what you're doing could help to bring more people who might not necessarily see themselves as being part of the yoga community, but could really benefit from what yoga would offer them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there's small things that we can do, but I think that there's big things that other people are already doing. And, you know, we have like volunteer programs and scholarship programs and all this kind of stuff. And I would love to have a more diverse experience here at Wanderlust. That would be great. But I think that what Congressman Ryan is doing and a lot of other people are doing is they are working to integrate yoga and mindfulness into government institutions, into schools, into prisons, into places that probably need it, you know, in some ways a lot more, or as much, if not more, than we do. So I think that that's one big thing, and it is happening. But I think that what then we can do is support at a policy level, or that we can support those things at a policy level and support initiatives and candidates and issues or whatever that are forwarding that cause, that are basically working to get yoga in public schools. It's like on YouTube, there's this incredible thing that Tim Ryan, has teamed up with, these young teachers in Baltimore that are going into the public schools there, like the poorest school systems, and have integrated like a regular meditation and yoga program. And there's these, YouTube videos of these kids talking about the effect of meditation and mindfulness on their own ability to learn and to cope with problems in their life. And you're like, oh my God, this is so obvious, This is not partisan, this is not controversial, this is not anything. This is just plain and simple obvious that we need to do those kinds of things, that kids, they need mindfulness in their lives.
Jeff, hi. Rather than ask a question, I'm going to just respond to that point that the lady just raised. This notion of yoga being a fairly expensive pursuit in America, and that it's a $6 billion industry is an interesting concept for me, having lived around it, grown up with it in India, and then now coming and practicing it and being part of the lifestyle. So I just want to say the problem, in my mind at least, is being addressed and solved. When I look around India, the fact that hundreds of millions of people practice it and it's freely available. In fact, most places will not even charge you anything. The idea being that it is this tradition that is gifted from masters who discovered and passed on. And if you go to the very traditional centers of yoga, and when I say yoga, I mean all aspects of yoga, not just the yoga asana practice, but devotional bhakti yoga, all of that put together. It is free and available to the entire society. And nobody is turned away from a yoga class or practice should they choose to explore it. In fact, in the traditional path, the teachers would be offended if you give them money because it's considered not part of the thing. So it is a very different kind of mentality. So the only point I wanted to make is there are models out there in our world, on our planet, where it can be made freely accessible to all of society if you take a certain mindful approach to the tradition and pass it on, as opposed to looking at it as a commercial endeavor, or the fact that it is a $6 billion industry and how do we grow it into a $16 billion industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think fair enough. Obviously, I think to play devil's advocate for some, we create a very, very large platform here at Wanderlust for yoga, but we could not do it if it wasn't a business. There's a commercial aspect to what we do that is just an absolute necessity. So I would say that while I do appreciate that comment, I would also say that that the other barrier for entry isn't necessarily financial, it's actually intellectual. It's discovery. It's like you're in Baltimore and you're 8 years old in a public school. It's like, what, yoga? Like, what's that? So I think that to some degree, it's about creating access and helping people discover mindfulness and mindful practices, and how that can affect their lives. And you know, I mean, there's a lot of people doing, you know, really important work doing that now. But I feel like that some of that has to happen at sort of a policy level. You know, we need to fund these kinds of programs. We need to get, you know, teachers in schools. We need to value that as an important part of our society.
I think one of the major takeaways for me, Jeff, was the idea that we could ride a wave of another paradigm for physical education. You know, PE for the 21st century. It's no longer just throw a kickball out into the field and say, get tired, you know, or, you know, learn, you know, basic community skills. But what if we were actually developing a kinesthetic lexicon, you know, for them to actually develop and have self-reflection and actually have the ability to communicate, you know, so much freer and actually have an embodied experience being put into it. The idea of a platform, of using this platform as for like a PE for the 21st century is pretty, that's a huge takeaway for me from today.
I think the idea of having organizing around political goals is definitely interesting, and I'm just wondering what if you have a clear idea of for yourself of a line that you the line that you walk of keeping people out if you take too strong of a political stance versus just bringing people in and just growing the community and letting that happen organically.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I want to be careful to separate how we now think of the word sort of political from the concept of policy. Because I think the yoga community, if you're going to come at it of like, okay, we're getting political now, then of course, like, it's just not going to, I don't feel like that's going to work. I feel that you know, the political climate, the way we think of national politics now, is so divisive and nasty that in many ways I think it works sort of in contrast or in opposition to how the yoga community likes to function. But I do feel that but if you are approaching it from more of a policy point of view, that these are policies that are a natural outgrowth of the values that we firmly hold, that to me does not feel particularly controversial or divisive. And to me, the ones that I gravitate are the ones, you know, that I spoke about before, and I actually probably, with also the addition of probably women's health, but I would say healthcare, you know, food policy, you know, environmentalism, you know, to me, you know, these things are are a natural connection to who we are as a community, and I don't feel like they're particularly controversial. I feel that the community, by and large, could get behind those issues. So, you know, for me, you know, again, I want to stress, like, you know, this isn't about like, oh, voting for Barack Obama over Mitt Romney, or, you know, or framing it that way. This is about actually engaging around policies that we believe will make the earth a better place, that also conform to the way we see the world through the lens of our practice, through the lens of our yoga. Yes, dear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have three different questions, and the first one is, why did you come up with this? Second is just why is there a kefir tent here? Why is there a veggie burger tent here?
Right.
And I think I know why the kefir tent is here, but that's not important.
Right.
So just why is this here? And why isn't this the first place that that it was done here? And why did you decide to do more, like in Vermont, Whistler, and Colorado?
Well, I do this partially for you. Well, I feel, good answer, thank you. I mean, I feel that there is a demand for this kind of community gathering everywhere. We don't think about like growing aggressively, really. We think about meeting demand. And I also believe in sort of, okay, see, you're not going to listen, wait for the answer. It's okay. I should have stuck with the first answer. That was simple. Yeah. No, I mean, we did, you know, certainly, you know, people associate the yoga community with, you know, San Francisco and New York and other places on the coasts. But, you know, last year we did a series of events in Atlanta and Dallas and Phoenix and, you know, places that you wouldn't necessarily associate like as with like the hotbed of like progressive thought or yoga practice or whatever. But these events were so popular, and beyond how popular they were, people were so grateful that we were there and that they could come together and gather as a community around this sort of thing. So for me, you know, like growing Wanderlust and doing it in different places is, it's basically, it's about optimism. You know, it's like, I feel that there is a demand everywhere for these kinds of gatherings, and that there are people everywhere that have these kinds of values and want to share them and meet and network and meet their community. So, you know, but of course we have to do this sustainably, so. All right, I want to say one last thing, sorry, is that all of the great speakers that are here in Tahoe, but at all of our events, me being the very bottom rung, and many very up high, Gopi and Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and all these folks have all of this pillar of this event that has really been made possible by our friends at Hay House who are here. And I like to think of it this way, is that, you know, Jimi Hendrix was a fantastic, gifted guitar player, but without his amplifier, no one would have ever known. And that's what Hay House is doing for so many important authors and voices. So please all acknowledge them and their contribution to growing this part of the event, which I think is a very, very important part of the event. So thank you.